Okay, welcome to part three of I guess we'll call this our calculus grapher, which finds tangent lines and areas under curves. This should be about the state that you left us if you followed along on the first two videos. So we have some things we're gonna clean up and we're gonna adjust. We're gonna add the ability to find zeros, and the in other words the first zero, as I see on this graph, we have a zero somewhere near negative 1.44 on this particular graph with this parameters. We're gonna clean this little equation up here. We're going to actually turn that into slope intercept and take out the possibility of there being a minus negative. This is a minimum of the graph. This is a maximum, but they don't really state the minimum maximum. It's also nice to locate the x coordinate or list this as an ordered pair. So we got a few things we can clean up, and I'm going to start this by taking this little min-max value, which are tied into these, and I'm going to drag it out of the way. And that's one of the really, really nice features on Excel is that I can drag, and this value, this negative 105, knew to chase it over to L20 as it was drug over there. So we can do that without much risk of losing data. And as I always say, you're only Control Z away from being back to your previous state. So we love Edit Undo or Control Z. All right, I'm going to start this by jumping into E19, and I'm just going to type in 0, and this is going to be maybe a little bit mystical unless you've already done this or you can follow along really well. But since we are graphing polynomials, and polynomials I always define as they are smooth curves where we would never lift our pencil. If our graph goes from a negative y value and jumps to a positive y value, in our t-chart here, if our y values jump from negative to positive, we must have hit a 0. Or if we jump to 0, of course, we've hit a 0 as well. So if there's a 0 in here, we've got it. But if I jump from negative to positive, and I can scroll down a ways, let's see, I'm still negative in the y values. And we stay negative for a while as we drag. But you see we're getting closer and closer to 0, and we're just about there. And I see right in here, I jump from a negative y value to a positive y value. It would sure be nice if I could identify that and realize that my x value of my 0 is somewhere close to one of these two. So here's our process for that. I'm going to go into cell E21, and I'm going to go with a formula equals if. Now, if two numbers cross from positive to negative, I can test that by taking the product of the numbers. And if the product of the numbers is negative, then I've crossed. If the product of the numbers is positive, it's either the result of having two negatives or two positives multiplied together. Additionally, if the product of the two numbers is 0, one of them 0, and we have nailed a 0. So I'm going to test the product of the two numbers prior to this. So my y values, I'm going to go equals if my B21 times my B20. If that is greater than 0, then I'm going to claim we haven't crossed a 0 here, unless we just very instantaneously crossed a 0 and came back between increments, which is pretty unlikely. So I'm going to say if that's greater than 0, comma, then I don't want to put anything in this cell. So I'm going to go double quotes, comma. Otherwise, if it's not greater than 0, then I'm less than 0, I had a positive or negative, or I'm equal to 0, I actually had a 0. Then I'm just going to put a 1 here. And a little disconcerting when I hit enter here because this is blank, and just as disconcerting when I start replicating this guy, and I replicate it all the way down, I see, oh, it looks blank all the way. But let's go ahead and take a look. Again, I'm kind of tracking my y's here when those become close to 0. So right here, and sure enough, there it is. It flagged those. It said, oh, the product of these is not greater than 0, so let's put a 1 here. So I'm going to use that as my little flag man that says, hey, look down here. This is where the 0 is. It's right in here. It's really between these two values, but boy, they're pretty close to our actual real 0. Okay, so with that in place, this is going to seem a little bit peculiar. I'm going to repeat my X chart right over here, and you're going to learn why in just a moment. So in F19, I'm putting X, and all I'm putting in F20 is equal to what's in A20, equals. And I'm going to replicate that down and repeat the X portion of my T chart. Likewise, G20Y, and in here equals B20, my negative 105, replicate that down. And again, feel free to, you're going to probably want to pause this at time to time. I'm going to go relatively quick here because some of you have seen this, and of course you have the ability to pause this. Okay, now my next point, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to go into H19, and I'm just going to type in 0 again, and here's where I'm actually going to state what the 0 is. And here's how we're going to do this. I want to look up and down here, this column, looking for a 1, and that is looking vertically, and there's a command called VLOOKUP, vertical lookup. I'm going to go equals VLOOKUP, parenthesis, and then you'll see it prompts me, and it says, what are we trying to look up here? Well, I'm looking for that 1, comma. What's the table I'm looking for that in? Well, the important thing is I want to return the X value. So the table has to include this column, but also has to include this column. And I could drag that all the way down, but I remember that this chart goes down to 10,020. There's 10,000 increments in this starting on line 20. So 10,000 steps from 20, 10,020, comma. Column index number is what column do I want to return? In other words, if I had a 1 right here, I would want to return this value as my 0. And that is column number 2, column 1, column 2. So 2. And then I'm going to type in false. And if you want more information on false, you can, while I'm typing in false here, you can look that up. But just let's take my word for it. So that guy is our negative 1.4131, which you may remember as being our value down in 2116, I believe it was, right here. It picked this value, it looked for the 1, and picked the value right next to it in the second column. So that's where that's coming from. So that is my 0. So I think maybe for right now, I'm just going to put a little color on that because I want to come back to that guy. Okay. Oh, you know what? That's not the one I want to come back to. We're going to work with that just a little bit. Okay, so right underneath that, I'm going to put what I'm actually going to have state above, because just showing this value up by my chart is of no use, and having them look at this is just kind of ugly down here. I don't need the viewer to see this, my scratchwork mess. So underneath this in H21, I'm going to type in equals, quotes, 0, colon, put in a space, end quotes. And then I'm going to state what my 0 is by putting in the word, or the symbol and, that's shift 7, and this. Now, we may see that we got some weird issues here as soon as I hit equals here. And we do, we have just a huge long decimal that we're going to have to deal with. So I'm going to go back into that formula, and around H20, I'm going to use my rounding. So that the command is R-O-U-N-D, R-O-U-N-D. I'm going to round H20 to comma the number of places I want to round. I want to have control over that. That is in C16 right over here. So I click that, and now you see it's 3. If I want to change that round to 5, now you see it rounds it to 5. That's pretty handy to have access to that. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to 3 for now. Okay, next thing I want to do, I'm going to take a look at my minimum and maximum. We've captured the minimum value, which is kind of boring because it's right at the beginning of the graph here. But our maximum value is kind of interesting because it's right in here. The maximum of the blue curve is somewhere right in here. But I'd love to get the X value with that. So what I would like to do is look for these values, the negative 105 and the 14.457 in here. And I'd love to return the X value over here, but VLOOKUP works by looking up values and returning values to their left. So I'd like to look for this negative 105 and return this negative 102. So underneath my negative 105 over here, I'm going to put equals VLOOKUP. What am I looking up? Well, I'm looking up negative 105, but I don't want to type that in there because this is dynamic. I want to look up this, comma, in what table? Start with my Y column, go to the right through my new X column. And again, we'll cheat the system a little bit here. I'm going down to F 10,020, looking for that. Returning the first, second, third, fourth, fifth column value from that table, and again, false. Okay, so I pick up that negative 2. That formula is so good. I'm going to steal it and put it into for my max formula. So I'm going to select this, go up to my formula bar, Control C, hit enter. Right next door, Control V in my formula bar. What do I want to change? I like the chart, but I don't want to look up negative 105, L20. I want to look up, in place of L20, I want to look up M19. Isn't that easy? And there's the value that my max is at, which seems pretty reasonable. Negative 0.87 is over in here somewhere, up where it looks like the blue peaks. Okay, underneath minimum, I'm going to put equals, quotes, min, colon, space, quotes. And now I want to, in addition to that, I want minimum, colon, space, left parenthesis. And now I want my x value, which is negative 2. And quotes, comma, space, quotes, and my y value, negative 105, and close out my parentheses in quotes, quotes, parentheses, quotes. That is called concatenating. It's a nice word, and it's just chunking things together. So I've got minimum is parenthesis, negative 2, comma, negative 105, close parentheses. Got it. And I'm going to repeat that. I'm going to put it in cell M23 just so we can see both of these since there's a little overlap. Down here, I'm going to go equals, quotes, max, colon, space, left parenthesis, end quotes. And my x value, this guy, comma, whoops, not comma, sorry, and quotes, comma, space, end quotes. And my y value, and quotes, left parenthesis, quotes. So I'll leave that there. You can take a look at that formula, but so you might want to pause it. And there we are. Uh-oh, what did I just learn? That this was not only an issue here, it might be an issue back there. I better have control over these numbers because I may not want to see that huge mess. So I'm going to go back to my minimum. Around L21, I'm going to put round L21 to comma my C16 value. You can either click it or you can type it in, C16. I also am going to want to round L20. We'll do a lot of this. Round L20 to C16. No effect there, but we should see an effect on this one. Around my M21, round this guy to C16. That's 3 at the time being. Round M20 to C16. Okay, so I'm going to now go ahead and color a couple of these things that I'm going to want access to. I like that. Kind of draw my attention to them. I want to have this information available up above. Okay, so I got zeros, I got mins, I got maxes. I'd like to display my area. You notice this is my sum of all of these guys, which if you remember, these are all of our trapezoids that we fill in between between the x-axis and the curve. This is my sum of all those. So we can have a negative area because all of this underneath here, down to negative 100, comes across as negative, and there's actually applications where we want that to be negative. I'm going to use E18 because it's available. I'm going to go equals, quotes, area, colon, space, end quotes, and I'm going to remember this time, I'm going to round this value to C16, and now I've got my area, which I could make appear a little bit better. You can see it there. It's 3 decimals, and I'm going to go ahead and make that be that light yellow too, just to kind of draw my attention to it. So at this point, I have everything I need, but what a mess I have as my chart is bleeding into my scratch work. So one thing I can do for that is I could just go to, let's give this a try. I'm going to select and drag through maybe 10 rows, 11 rows or so, and I'm just going to go ahead and right click on one of those and insert, and I get, a little scary, sorry, we'll try this. I get that guy. I get some rows inserted in there, but all of my data stayed the same. Everything still looks good. Excel's pretty smart about that. The only thing that kind of got muddied up was my fonting here. So I'm going to turn that to no fill. And I'm going to come back up, and I need to grab some of these values into WordArt up above. So maybe I'll take this one. This was my minimum. I'm going to bring it down here, and I'm going to, this thing was associating to cell L31, or this guy. But I'm going to have this guy associate now to this, my minimum. Isn't that nice? I'm going to copy this, Control C, Control V, and I'm going to have this one associate to this nice maximum down here I drew in the yellow. Enter. Nice. I'm going to Control C, Control V. I'm going to have this guy associate to, instead of M34, it's going to associate to my area. Enter. I'm going to have this guy, whoops, Control C, Control V. I'm going to have this guy associate, instead of to my area, to my 0. Enter. And now I just got some arrangements to do. So how do I want this to look? If I have this much screen space, I'd like to be using it up, which certainly allows me to adjust my font here. Maybe I'll go to 16. Column B clearly needs to be a little wider. Column C probably needs to be wider, and the one I'm probably most concerned about is this, because I might want a bunch of decimals in here. So I'm going to actually take these guys and reduce those down to maybe a font of 12 or 11, something like that, realizing that, you know, if I don't pick such a convenient value for x here, 1.34567, I'm going to have some decimals. I might want to see some of that. Okay. Notice all of these guys updated. If I change this to 2.4567 instead of 1, watch on 321, all of the areas, watch any of these, 321, including the graph, they all update instantly. Now I do notice this guy should be gone. Is that correct? Delete, yes, that guy is gone. And now I've got some things over here that just need some arranging. I'm trying to use up my space. I'm just going to pull these up where I can see them and try to put them somewhere appropriate, maybe resize them a little bit. Then we're going to come back and talk about this equation right here, which I'm not too crazy about. So I'll just hide it up here for now. And let's go ahead and use up some space here. I'm going to have my chart use up some space. Maybe leave some room under it, leave a little bit of room over it. I like this guy showing. It doesn't necessarily have to be that big. I could change its font size down to maybe 18 or so. I'd like an equation up here eventually, but I'm going to use this one. I'm going to use a modified equation. So I'm going to leave some room for an equation. Maybe I'd want my 0 in here. Maybe font doesn't need to be that big. 14. Realize I might be using more decimals, and if I use more decimals, I might run out of room here at some point. Looks like this one just flat rounds off, but you see how these expand their size? So I might need to have a little bit more space available for that. Maybe I'd have my minimum next, and I'll need some space for it. What did I make this? 14, so 14, let's stay consistent here. And maybe this guy at 14. 12 is pretty much overkill, but you're going to realize you're going to, at times, to make this look good, you're going to have to slide things around a little bit, and that's fine. Maybe area, pop it up here. It's kind of different than the min, max, zeros. These are all kind of ordered pairs. This even is an ordered pair, negative 1.4 comma 0. And last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into slope-intercept form. So to get this guy to be slope-intercept form, I'm going to go ahead and solve equation that we typically work with. I'll use this for scratch work down here right now, and then I'll delete it. We typically work with y minus a y coordinate, I'll call that y1, equals m times x minus an x coordinate, I'll call that x1. That's point slope form, and I'll go ahead and make that a little bit bigger so you can see it. That's what we'd typically be working with. If I was to solve that for y, I get y. I need some bigger fonts here. What'd I go? 22. Let's go 22 here. I would get y equals mx minus x1 plus y1. I distribute the m's and add the y1 to the other side. So I'm going to represent that. And I'm going to build it in here, and then I'll just move it a little bit later since we have this nice clean space, but I'll just drag it and move it. So I'm going to start building this by saying, well, I want my formula to be y equals, maybe a space in here, a space in here. You don't have to have this written down at all, maybe a space here. And then all of this is going to kind of be combined, either plus or minus something. So this is a little bit tricky. But I want my formula to start with y. I need some more 22s here, don't I? Let's go 22s for right now. I'm going to have it start with y space equals space. And then I'm going to put what I would put next here. And next here would be my slope. So this is going to be equal to, I'm going to round that slope though. Here's my slope. Round to, in this case, 6. I'm going to change that in a hurry. Places. That's my m. So I'm going to round that guy. And it rounded to less than that just because it ran out of room in the cell. So there's my slope. After my slope, I would want to have x space. And then I need to decide whether I'm putting in a plus or minus. And this is kind of the tricky part. So plus or minus is going to be dependent upon, let's go back on this for a second. Where's this guy located? Here we go. It's going to be dependent on the value of this. If this value, this should be m times, by the way, m times x1. If negative m times x1 plus y1 is positive, then I want a plus. But if negative m times x1 plus y1 is negative, I want a minus. So I'm just going to put right up in here for now, equals negative my m value times my x value plus my y value, just so I can reference that. It happens to be a negative at this time. So I know I'm going to want this to be a minus. So how am I going to handle that? I'm going to go in this next cell over as I'm kind of chunking my equation together, which we'll clean up soon. And I'm going to put equals if this value is less than 0, then I want to have a minus. So I'm going to go minus space. Else, if this value, where'd I go here? Control Z, yikes. Well, let's start that over. I don't know exactly why I lost that, but we'll give that another shot. Equals, if this value is less than 0, then minus space. Else, if this value is greater than 0, then plus space. Else, if I get to here, it must be 0, double quotes, close parentheses, close parentheses. So in this case, there's my minus. Now, all that's left is to put this value into here, but I don't want to put the negative. I've taken care of the negative here, so I'm going to put in here equals absolute value of this guy. Now, if that was a 0, however, I wouldn't want to have a 0 there, so I'm going to go ahead and put if this does not equal 0, then absolute value of it, else nothing, double quotes. All right, well, that's pretty ugly. There's my equation, but now I'm going to just concatenate it together. So I'm going to put maybe right in here, why not, equals this cell, and this cell, and this cell, and this cell, and this cell. How nice is that? But we quickly see we may have some challenges in here because I did not round the values in here. So I need this to be rounded, the absolute value rounded to C16 places. And there we go. That equation, really nice. So what am I going to do? I'm going to take this equation up here that was associated to F29. I'm going to associate it to this cell. And there we go. So last but not least, all I need to do, I don't really need these anymore. That's scratch work. I do need all of this. I just don't really need it here. So I'm going to take it and drag it somewhere where you're not so ugly or not so ugly looking and you're just out of the way. How smart is Excel? Did that change my formula because I changed the cells? Nope, my formula is still there. Isn't that cool? All right, I'm going to give this space to grow, be a little bit bigger. And I kind of like the way this appears. Now, you could do a lot to make this look a lot nicer than what I've done here. We could space this out better. We could have this stop, this graph stop in line with that. But I'm going to stop at that point, other than to say, if I was absolutely positively convinced, I'm done editing this. I love the way it looks. And realize this is a dynamic graph. If I change, if I change my x here to say negative 1.4, I've got a dynamic graph here. If I change A to be, let's go with A to be 0 even. I've got a dynamic graph. I've got a new tangent line. I've got new equations of the tangent. I've got a new area. Not applicable. Why not? Because there is no 0. You want to see the 0? See if it works? I'm going to make this be minus 8. You got a 0 now, and there it is. My 0, it looks like it's at about negative 0.916. Do I want it to be more accurate? Sure I do. This is a very dynamic graph. I can do a lot of things with this. So pretty slick. But if you're absolutely sure that it looks the way you want it to look, maybe the last step you want to do would be you might want to go into File, Options, Advanced. So now you're in Advanced Excel Editor. I'm going to move down here to display options for this workbook and turn off the horizontal scroll bar. They don't need it. I don't want them scrolling around seeing all that ugly scratch work. Turn off the vertical scroll bar. I don't even need to see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows or the A, B, C, D columns. Grid lines, turn them off. Click OK. Isn't that pretty? Got a real clean look to it. You can adjust that around. So where will we be going from here? Our next step would be to now, I think I'm going to take this guy, right click down on my sheet tab, rename that poly, just for polynomial. And now I can use this as a template because everything's good here. What do I have to do? I'm going to move or copy this. I'm going to move it to the end. I'm going to create a copy of it and click OK. Took a little while. Here's my copy. I'm going to rename this one Sine, maybe with an E on the end of that. And now, I'm not going to go beyond this, but if I'm going to do sine, and let's say my equation I'm going to use is this guy right here. If I'm going to use y equals a sine of bx plus c, and that's going to be the new graph I'm going to create. What do I have to change? Well, cosmetically, this has to be changed. No big deal. I don't need an E and an F, so I would probably delete those guys and maybe recolor that. I'm not going to do all of this. Maybe take off the border on those. Let's take it off first. I think I got to put a top back on. Okay. So I just need that. I wouldn't move this stuff. I'd leave it right there. I don't have to change this, don't have to change this, don't have to change this. This equation has to be changed because it's my polynomial equation. That has to be changed, or let's see. If I double click it, oh shoot, I didn't want to do that. I'm going to click OK. Here's the good news. I'm always just a Control Z away from being back to where I was. That's a pretty good illustration. This equation has to be changed to represent this. This equation has to be changed to represent the derivative of this. So that's 1 change, 2 change, 3 change. And believe it or not, to make this work, there's only one more change. This guy right here has to be changed to again represent this equation. And then we have to replicate that. And that's it. Everything else will be automatic updated. So as I was saying the other day, you're going to create maybe 10 of these. If you have poly created correctly, you are probably way more than halfway done, even though you've only done one of your 10 sheets. We've got all the heavy lifting out of the way now, so should be a pretty good time as we move into some of these others. The biggest challenge you're going to have is as we move into these other formulas, will be finding derivatives of some of these things. Some of those pretty straightforward, some of those a little bit different. Oh, by the way, this one probably, if you're going to start working on this one would actually also have a plus D on the end of it. So if you want to get a head start and jump on that guy, feel free. But that's what we're going to be spending the next couple of days on. There'll be another video as I go through that process tomorrow, and boy, that will be a short one. So thanks for taking the time to take a look at this. Hope you're enjoying this. This is going to be something that even if you're not enjoying, can be extremely useful to you in your coming years. So we will look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.